Hi, my name's Chris Arnold and I'm going to talk you through the methods and the processes by which you can generate your own screening tools which will help you identify young people at risk of dropping out. Before we get into the details of how we develop the screening tool, there are 6 questions you have to be able to answer in a positive manner. They're what we call the 6 necessary and sufficient conditions required to justify screening. The first is that there are things you can measure. Things you can measure about people might be something to do with their history, it might be something to do about them, but there are measurable factors. And secondly, that these factors are sufficiently discrete to be able to discriminate between the 2 groups. The third is that these factors are what we call robust across time. So these aren't things that just come and go in some kind of transient manner, they're things which are stable for 2 or 3 years. So for example, if somebody is moving house a lot, that they are moving house over a period of at least 2 years. Fourthly, you've actually got the money to do this. This does cost money, it has to be economically viable, and it has to be socially acceptable for you to undertake these sort of kind of processes. Fifthly, perhaps most important, once you've got the data, once you've got the tool, are there interventions that you can adopt which will help prevent the dropout? If not, what's the point of going through the process? And sixthly, and don't ignore this one, this will involve some invasion of privacy. And there may be groups who object to that. There has to be a political will that this is a legitimate process. So local politicians, local leaders need to feel that this is a worthwhile process. So those are the 6 conditions. First, that there are measurable factors. Secondly, that they discriminate between the 2 groups. Third, that these factors are robust across time. Fourth, that you've actually got the money, it's economically viable and socially acceptable to undertake this operation. Fifth, that once you've got the data, once you know, have identified the young people, then there are interventions you can adopt which will help those young people continue with their courses. And sixthly, that the politicians are on board. To generate the model, there are 9 stages you need to go through. And together, Tracy and I will walk you through that process from beginning to end. Stage 1 is quite creative. You have to generate hypotheses about what might be the risk factors which would identify your particular group.
In order to do that, if you get young people together and the people that work with those young people, then ask, okay, so what affects you? So that might be teachers or tutors or youth workers or advisors like myself that go into schools and have a look at the things that you think might affect them. So this could be learning difficulties or disabilities, or it could be their attendance at school or their education levels.
The second stage is a realistic look at the economics of collecting the data. You've probably got a list of 20, maybe up to 40 different hypotheses that the young people and the staff have generated. Even if all of those pieces of data were easily available, then the time taken to collect all 40 pieces of information is probably too great, particularly when you start to look at large populations. So you must have a look at the economics. How much time would it take you to gather information about each of those possible risk factors?
In reality, the other thing that you need to consider is whether or not you can answer yes or no to a question in relation to the factor that you're looking at. For example, in the original study we looked at address type, so how many times a young person had moved around from address to address. So the movement of a young person was the impact that we thought was having an effect on our young people. In order to use that factor, we needed to answer yes or no so it could be inputted into the spreadsheet. So rather than the question of how many times has this young person moved in the last 12 months, we had to rephrase it as to has this young person moved more than once in the last 12 months. That's a key thing that you need to remember, is that each of these data items need to be asked a question from. So you need to go through your risk factors and find out what is the question that will give you a yes or no answer that you can then use the data properly.
The third stage is to look at the feasibility of collecting these items of data for large populations. If, for example, you were looking at a whole year cohort in a mid-sized local authority, you're talking at about thousands of young people. Is it feasible to collect information on thousands of young people if those pieces of data aren't readily available in some other database?
So, a handy hint from me on the practical side for that is that you have to look closely at the factors that you've decided. Can I use the information from existing databases, and is it easily available and easy to access? The best way to do it is to look through the list that you've gone through and just tick or cross which ones you can and can't do. Do this relatively quickly and don't spend too long deliberating, can I or can't I? Because by the time that you've done that, that tells me that it will take too much time for you to access and gain the data correctly.
The fourth stage is to decide on a sampling method. It's quite likely that you'll be using Pilot, but the ideal numbers are to find about 40 young people who dropped out and 40 young people who continued. And you match those young people by age and by gender. There might be other things you want to match, but those are the key ones you have to start with. Once you've done that, decided on your sampling method, then you have to collect the data, and that's stage 5.
So to do this, you need to think about the easiest way to collect the data. By now, you'll have narrowed down your 30 or 40 risk factors down to a manageable number. Usually, this could be between 12, 14. So think about how you can access the young people that you need to sample. So if you use current students, for those who are still on their courses, they're easily accessible perhaps in lessons or in a tutor time or some other time where they're all grouped together. This can be done by a simple questionnaire. Again, each question will be a yes or no answer, so it should be easily collectible. For those 40 that have dropped out or they are not in the institution that you're going into, you need to consider how best you get hold of them. Often this is the tricky bit. So this is where you will have to make phone calls or try and get in touch with them via other means. For myself, in the original process, I even had to look at home visits for some of them. Obviously this will have a time implication, and it is perhaps the most difficult part of it. You need to allow yourself enough time to gather this, but it's important that it's done correctly.
The sixth stage is to analyse the data and build a model. The analysis will reveal two things. First of all, it'll reveal those factors which don't discriminate between the two groups, and that'll be very clear. It'll also give you an indication of those factors which do discriminate. But furthermore, the analysis will give you the weightings of those factors which are statistically significant, and this will allow us to build a model which can be used with a larger group, perhaps a year cohort, to identify the high, medium and also low risk students in the future. Stage 7 is to test the model. It's probably worth not trying the model with a whole cohort, that could be several thousand students, but perhaps find a friendly institution who's prepared to trial it for you. In so doing, you look at a whole year and you run the model, and you then divide these students into one of at least 3 categories. Very high risk, medium risk, low risk, and there might be a 4th category of 0 risk.
When you're collecting the data and you're using the model that you've gained, try to remember to make it as easy as possible to gain the information. So could you involve the questionnaire in an induction period, for example? That way you get each student to complete it and it's easily inputted onto the datasheet. The other thing to remember is that if a young person may be absent on that day, you really need to gain that when they're next in so that it's a complete set of data.
Stage 8 is to build your interventions. We would encourage you to think in terms of different interventions for the different risk groups. The highest risk groups get the most intensive intervention, followed by the medium risk, followed by the low risk.
Think about the high risk in terms of one-to-one contact, so maybe monthly meetings or even more than that if necessary. Maybe contact with parents, make sure that they understand the input as well, will kind of give them a little bit more support and understanding of what support they're receiving and why they're receiving it. The medium risk may be more targeted to events that happen within your local organisation already. We have specific events for young people surrounding careers, so the medium risk students would have a personal invite to those and just be thought of to invited to anything extra that's happening. The low risk would just receive what they normally receive.
Finally, stage 9, we have to evaluate both the model and the process. There are 4 different groups that we will need to count. First is the number of high-risk students who did drop out, the number of high-risk students who didn't drop out, the number of low-risk students who did drop out, and the number of low-risk students who didn't drop out. Clearly, what we're looking for is a very small number of young people who dropped out who were in the low-risk group. But, as can happen, the model can miss a particular piece of information.
In a previous study, that situation did occur. The group were a very small amount of young girls. These girls had low self-esteem, so they kept coming back to see the advisor even though they were identified as low risk. They needed support with application forms and were scared of making errors. So whilst they were targeted as low risk, they did actually need quite a lot of support. So this was one particular factor that affected a particular group of young people. This just gives an added dimension to the project and something to consider when you're looking at improving the model in the future.
It's important to remember that we're building models and no model is going to be perfect. If you're able to identify more than half of the young people who are likely to drop out early, then you're actually doing pretty well. A second feature that you may have to consider is that models may need revising, and I would certainly strongly recommend that you think about revising it at least every other year. But remember this, that even the most pessimistic estimate is that early intervention in this field will save 4 times its cost over time, and some organisations say it's up to 9 times the saving. So it's well worth going through if it enables you to intervene early to prevent young people dropping out.
And the primary aim for me is that we're helping young people, and by successfully helping those people at high and medium risk, we're improving their life chances.